Roman Reigns just sat backstage and watched Jacob Fatu get wrecked, like he planned it all along. But that's not what happened. After Money in the Bank 2025, when Jacob Fatu shocked the world by turning on Solo Sikoa, we all thought the bloodline was finished from within. Broken. Done. But this week on Smackdown, Solo didn't just strike back, he made it personal. Brutal. Calculated. And Roman? He didn't say a word, but his reaction said everything. Was this Solo's revenge? Or Roman's silent approval? Let's break it down. The tribal chief. Silent. Watching. And Solo Sikoa delivering a calculated, merciless beatdown on Jacob Fatu, the very man who had betrayed him less than 2 weeks earlier at Money in the Bank 2025. It all looked too perfect. Too orchestrated. As if Solo had become Roman's sharpest blade again, striking down disloyalty not out of emotion, but out of order. Justice. Obedience. But that's not what happened. At Money in the Bank 2025, Jacob Fatu, unstoppable, feared, proud member of the Anoa'i bloodline, turned on Solo Sikoa with a steel chair shot heard around the world. Literally. The arena in Toronto gasped in unison, as Solo dropped to the mat and Jacob stood above him, breathing heavy, eyes wild, and not a single soul sure of why. The betrayal shattered everything fans thought they understood about this new iteration of the bloodline. For months, WWE had been carefully crafting a new legacy. With Roman Reigns on a self-imposed hiatus after WrestleMania 41, the bloodline didn't vanish, it mutated. Solo stepped up. Jacob Fatu joined in. The foundation shifted, but it held. Or so we thought. That moment at MITB exposed the cracks. And maybe it created new ones. To understand why this matters so much, you need to go back. Roman Reigns didn't become tribal chief with flashy speeches or outrageous gimmicks. He built his kingdom on presence, posture, and power. He spoke with his eyes, with the tension in his shoulders, with the silence that followed a victory. For years, he made us believe that every move, every betrayal, every alliance, every pinfall, was part of a master plan. And sometimes it was. Sometimes it wasn't. That was the brilliance of it. Roman blurred the line between destiny and manipulation. And that's why this moment, this silent, calculating look after Solo's revenge, hits so hard. Because when Roman doesn't speak, the universe starts guessing. Smackdown didn't close with chaos. It didn't end in shouts or challenges or stare-downs. It ended with Jacob Fatu laid out, bloodied and broken. It ended with Solo standing tall, his face expressionless, as if purging a traitor was just another chore on the to-do list. And Roman? He wasn't at ringside. He didn't come down the ramp. He didn't FaceTime in from a tropical retreat. WWE cut to a single backstage shot. Roman Reigns. Sitting. Watching. Arms folded. No words. And that single image broke the internet. Why? Because it didn't answer anything. It suggested everything. Was he pleased? Did he order it? Was Solo being punished before, or just playing his part? Was Jacob's betrayal actually part of a much bigger, longer game? Theories exploded. Clips went viral. Analysts on YouTube dissected the footage frame by frame. Look at the slight nod, they said. Watch how he blinks when Fatu gets hit with the Samoan spike. In wrestling, reaction shots are supposed to clarify a story. Roman's shot distorted it. And that's why it worked. Let's not pretend Solo Sikoa has always been the centerpiece. For much of his early run, he was the quiet enforcer. A wrecking ball with no emotions. But since Roman's departure after WrestleMania, he's been stepping into the light, whether the fans wanted him to or not. His character sharpened. His promos got tighter. His violence became more precise. And when Jacob Fatu entered the scene, it looked like the Bloodline 2.0 was finally taking shape. But there's a reason why every empire needs a king. Roman wasn't just the face of the bloodline, he was its gravity. Without him, Solo and Fatu were circling each other with the kind of tension that couldn't hold forever. MITB proved it. And Smackdown confirmed, when that tension snaps, it's violent. Here's the truth, this isn't just a story about wrestling. It's about legacy. Family. Power. Control. The bloodline has always been more than a faction. It's a symbol of generational dominance, of Samoan wrestling heritage, passed down through Rikishi, Yokozuna, The Rock, Umaga, and now through Roman, Solo, and Jacob. So when betrayal happens within that legacy, it doesn't just affect kayfabe, it stirs something deeper. Fans feel it. Wrestlers feel it. Commentary tightens around it. That's why this storyline resonates so hard. It feels real. Because whether or not Roman ordered the revenge, it's personal. And we know it. Wrestling fans are used to betrayals. Tag teams implode. Alliances crumble. Stables dissolve. It's part of the cycle. But when a betrayal happens inside something as iconic and carefully crafted as the bloodline, it hits differently. Especially when it's not just a heel turn, it's family turning on family. Cousin turning on cousin. This isn't just a dramatic plot twist. It's an echo of real-world legacy and respect. In a faction defined by loyalty, tradition, and honor, Jacob Fatu's attack on Solo Sikoa wasn't just violent, it was sacrilegious. It wasn't a man turning on another man. It was a branch of the Inoue dynasty snapping itself off the tree. When Solo collapsed to the mat at Money in the Bank, something broke. And Roman wasn't even there. That absence amplified everything. It made the betrayal feel unsupervised, uncontained, unbalanced. Which brings us to Smackdown. The night everything shifted again. As the cameras followed Solo through the arena, there was no music, no words. Just a look on his face that said one thing: I'm not here to talk. I'm here to finish what you started. Jacob Fatu had no time to explain. No promo. No justification. What happened next was clinical. A message written in bruises. Chairs. Steel. Spikes. This wasn't a revenge promo. It was punishment. And when the cameras cut to Roman backstage, seated in silence, watching the monitor like a Roman emperor watching gladiators fall in the arena, the internet froze. It wasn't what he did. It was what he didn't do. He didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just watched. No words. No Paul Heyman to translate. No interference. It was the kind of silence that echoes louder than chants. And here's where things get complicated. If Solo attacked Jacob Fatu out of rage, you'd expect fire in his eyes. But his face was calm. Cold. Empty. That kind of precision doesn't look like fury, it looks like orders followed. And Roman's stoic response? That didn't look like shock. It looked like satisfaction. This is why fans started speculating instantly. Because that wasn't just storytelling. That was layered character work. You could interpret it 5 different ways and all of them could be true. Maybe Roman never left. Maybe he never needed to speak again to control the board. Or maybe this was the moment where Solo proved he no longer needed permission. And if that's the case, if Solo acted on his own, not in loyalty, but in power, then what we just witnessed wasn't Roman's plan. It was his challenge. We are now looking at a bloodline with no clear head of the table. No declared leader. Only instinct. Survival. And retaliation. Roman's legacy has always been built on manipulation masked as leadership. He made Jey Uso bend the knee. He gaslit Jimmy into rebellion. He humiliated Sami Zayn until he broke. That's what he does. He bends people until they snap, and then calls it family. But Solo? Solo has never needed convincing. He's always followed Roman, not because he was manipulated, but because he saw power. And now, for the first time, Solo is showing us what he does when someone else breaks the code. He doesn't yell. He doesn't tweet. He breaks bones. That brings us to a pivotal question. What did Roman's silence mean? Was it relief? Satisfaction? Approval? Or was it shock? Maybe this wasn't his plan. Maybe Solo has taken the first real step into his own legacy. A legacy not as the enforcer, but as the executioner. Not as the little brother, but as the new alpha. If that's the case, then this isn't the continuation of the bloodline. It's the beginning of something more dangerous. A family without leadership. A dynasty with no crown. A wolf pack without a leash. And yet, even as we talk about Solo and Fatu, everything still centers around one man. Roman Reigns. Because this is what Roman built. A kingdom so powerful, it continues to expand even when the king is gone. A story so layered, he doesn't need to narrate it anymore. His influence is everywhere. Even in silence. The bloodline has entered a new chapter, one without certainty. And that's what makes it electrifying. It's no longer about who's in charge. It's about who survives. So as we dig into this saga, piece by piece, just remember this: sometimes power isn't about being seen. It's about being felt. And Roman Reigns, without saying a word, just made the entire WWE universe feel something deep, confusing, and unforgettable. You might think you know where this story is going. You don't. Because when the silence speaks louder than the promos, that's when the war really begins. Money in the Bank 2025 wasn't supposed to end like that. It was supposed to be the night the bloodline reminded the WWE universe that their empire didn't crumble with Roman Reigns' absence. That Solo Sikoa could command fear just as his cousin once did. That Jacob Fatu wasn't just a new face, he was a force. But wrestling doesn't care about how it's supposed to go. What happened that night wasn't just a twist. It was a detonation. Let's rewind the clock. The main event wasn't even about a title, it was about legacy. It was billed as the bloodline's return to dominance. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu had been presented as the new juggernauts. Roman's chosen successors. The quiet fire and the wild animal. The calm before and the storm itself. They entered together, not just as a team, but as a wall. There was a gravity to them. No music could do justice to the tension in the air. Every step Solo took looked like it was planned 10 days ago. Every movement from Fatu felt like it could explode at any second. Together, they felt unbeatable. But from the very start of that match, something felt off. Jacob wasn't sinking. His tags were delayed. His expression was clouded. There was no nod, no hand on the shoulder, no glance of reassurance between him and Solo. This was no longer a brotherhood in motion. This was a time bomb in progress. Still, no one expected the betrayal. It happened fast. Too fast for the crowd to process in real time. Solo was setting up for the final blow. He had their opponent stunned, back turned, ready for a Samoan spike. The ref was distracted. The crowd was on their feet. And then, crack. Steel chair. From behind. Solo dropped. And the camera panned just in time to catch the unthinkable, Jacob Fatu standing over him, holding the chair like it was a weapon he'd always been waiting to use. The crowd went dead silent. Then chaos erupted. This wasn't a heel turn. This was mutiny. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, it was in the timing. It was the most vulnerable moment. The match was theirs. The plan was working. The win was locked. And Jacob Fatu chose that moment to swing. This was psychological. This wasn't about strategy. It was about emotion. Anger. Power. Maybe even jealousy. But Fatu didn't cut a promo afterward. He didn't shout, this is MY time. He didn't stare down the camera or launch into a 5-minute monologue like most villains do when they turn. He did something worse. He walked out. Slow. Cold. Unapologetic. No explanation. No flash. He left Solo writhing in the ring with the chair beside him and the crowd in stunned disbelief. Commentary didn't even know what to say. They stumbled through lines. Graves asked, why would he do that? Cole kept repeating, what just happened? Booker T's voice cracked when he said, that's family, man. That's family. The betrayal broke more than Solo's momentum. It broke the illusion. The illusion that the Bloodline was still a unit. That Roman's vision was still alive. That legacy could be inherited without a fight. Instead, it reminded the world of something darker. The most dangerous betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from inside. This wasn't like when Seth Rollins turned on the Shield. That was shocking, sure. But that was about ambition. This felt like vengeance. And we didn't even know what for. That's what made it hit so hard. Because Jacob Fatu had only been in WWE for a few months. But in that short time, he'd established himself as a wrecking machine. He wasn't just a new Bloodline member. He felt like the second coming of Umaga, wild, unrelenting, untouchable. So, for him to walk away like that, without rage, without chaos, without even looking back, it was disturbing. He didn't just betray Solo. He rejected him. Rejected the idea of loyalty. Rejected the narrative WWE had been building for months. And fans? They lost it. Social media erupted in all directions. Why would Fatu do this? Was this the plan all along? Did Roman know? Is Fatu trying to end the Bloodline from within? Within 24 hours, #FatuBetrayal was trending worldwide. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Wrestling Reddit spun into overdrive. Some fans were furious. Others were thrilled. But everyone agreed, it was the biggest swerve since Seth broke the Shield in 2014. And that's not a small comparison. Because WWE had been walking a fine line with the Bloodline 2.0. When Roman stepped away after WrestleMania, they could have disbanded the faction. Let it rest. Let the legacy go quiet for a while. But instead, they leaned in. They doubled down. They handed the reins to Solo and let Fatu step in. And it worked. For a while. But MITB proved something no one wanted to admit, the Bloodline without Roman doesn't work like the Bloodline with him. Because without the tribal chief, there's no hierarchy. No control. No law. It becomes a war zone. And that's exactly what Jacob Fatu triggered. A civil war. The next week, WWE programming treated the moment like gospel. The betrayal wasn't just acknowledged, it was studied. Replayed in slow motion. Recut in promo packages. Every announcer treated it like a crime scene. And that's when the theories started pouring in. Some said Jacob felt used. That he was brought into the Bloodline too late, and treated like a sidekick when he should have been a centerpiece. That he was sick of taking orders from Roman through proxies like Heyman or Solo. Others claimed Solo had become too controlling. That Roman's absence gave him a taste of power, and Fatu didn't like the new regime. A third camp? They believed it was Roman himself who engineered the betrayal. That Fatu's turn was part of a long con to test Solo's loyalty. A lesson in pain. A purification ritual to see if Solo would break or ascend. That's how deep this moment cut. Because it wasn't just about who swung the chair. It was about what that swing meant. If Jacob Fatu can turn on Solo Sikoa, a man he's bled with, a man who took him in, then what hope does the Bloodline have? It told fans, don't get comfortable. Don't trust alliances. Don't believe in legacies. Because in 2025, betrayal doesn't come with a warning. It comes with steel. And silence. To truly understand what makes the current chaos so riveting, you have to go back. Not just a few months. Not even a year. You have to rewind the entire Bloodline saga, back to 2020, when Roman Reigns returned from hiatus and planted the first seed of his reign as tribal chief. Because what's happening now, with Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu tearing at each other's throats, isn't just the result of a betrayal. It's the aftermath of a dynasty cracking under its own legacy. This is the price of power. And Roman Reigns has been charging interest since day one. When Roman turned heel in August 2020 and aligned himself with Paul Heyman, it changed the WWE landscape. He wasn't just back, he was reborn. Cold. Calculated. Dangerous. He didn't just defeat his opponents, he made them bow. He broke Jey Uso emotionally. He manipulated Jimmy into loyalty. He turned family into foot soldiers. Roman Reigns wasn't just the top guy. He was the guy who decided who was allowed at the table. And he made sure everyone knew, sit down, acknowledge me, or be crushed. The early Bloodline era was about control. Roman didn't share power, he centralized it. Every promo, every match, every segment served one purpose, to remind the WWE universe that Roman wasn't defending a title. He was defending a throne. That's what made it different from every other faction in WWE history. Evolution had respect. DX had chaos. The Shield had justice. But the Bloodline had something deeper, generational identity. They weren't fighting for gold. They were fighting for legacy. For tribal dominance. That's why every betrayal, every submission, every tear felt personal. Because it wasn't just wrestling anymore, it was family. And the Bloodline wasn't just a group. It was a religion. So, what changed? Let's talk about now. 2025's version of the Bloodline is unrecognizable from what it once was. No more Roman cutting menacing promos flanked by the Usos. No more Paul Heyman spinning prophecy at ringside. No more grand entrances with championship gold gleaming under the lights. Now we have Solo Sikoa. Alone. Quiet. Holding together a fractured mythos by force. And for a brief time, Jacob Fatu stood beside him, looking like the resurrection of the Empire. Two monsters. Two heirs. One legacy. But it was an illusion. Without Roman Reigns, the Bloodline didn't just evolve. It fractured. What made the original version work was hierarchy. Everyone had a role. Roman was the top. Jey was the right hand. Jimmy, the enforcer. Heyman, the strategist. Every piece had purpose. Now? It's unclear. Who leads? Who decides? Who speaks for the Bloodline? That's the problem. Solo Sikoa was never groomed to lead. He was groomed to enforce. To act without hesitation. To destroy without question. He thrived in silence, because that's what Roman needed him to be, silent power. But silence doesn't fill a vacuum. It just delays the chaos. When Roman left after WrestleMania 41, the WWE Universe expected someone to rise. A new tribal chief. A new chapter. But instead, we got limbo. Solo never declared himself the head. Fatu never pledged allegiance. Heyman disappeared. And fans began asking a dangerous question, is the Bloodline still the Bloodline without Roman? The answer, as MITB and Smackdown have shown, is complicated. Let's talk character evolution. Solo Sikoa has transformed dramatically over the past year. He's no longer just a quiet threat. He's methodical. Cold. Precise. He walks slower. Talks less. Hits harder. He's developed into a character that doesn't ask for approval, he demands fear. But fear is not leadership. Fear is control. And control without direction? It falls apart. Enter Jacob Fatu. When he arrived, it felt like a rebirth. He brought energy, chaos, intensity. He didn't need to talk. His presence alone screamed danger. WWE marketed him as the missing link in the bloodline. A throwback to the wild Samoan energy of past generations. For a moment, it worked. The fans believed. Roman's throne may have been empty, but at least the bloodline had a new body to rally behind. But Fatu didn't come to serve. He came to conquer. His betrayal at MITB wasn't just a character move, it was a rejection of the entire structure. He wasn't content being another soldier. He didn't want to be the new JUSO. He wanted to burn the table Roman built and build something of his own. And that's the problem. Without Roman, the bloodline isn't a family. It's a power struggle. And what we're seeing now isn't a faction storyline, it's the fallout of years of manipulation finally reaching its boiling point. Let's look at what used to keep this house of cards standing. Roman Reigns had the ability to suppress egos. Not by humility, but by dominance. Jay, Jimmy, Sammy, Heyman, every one of them had ambition, but they bent the knee. They sacrificed themselves to feed the myth of the tribal chief. He forced them to buy in. But now? There's no one demanding loyalty. No speeches. No threats. No family dinners where betrayal is punished with pain. Now it's every man for himself. Solo has no leash. Fatu answered to no one. And the bloodline's core value, honor through obedience, has been replaced by chaos disguised as revenge. What used to be a kingdom is now a battlefield. The most telling sign of this shift? The fans. Back then, people feared Roman. Now, they fear the unknown. The cheers aren't for dominance. They're for destruction. When Solo attacked Fatu, it wasn't met with horror, it was met with shock and awe. Not because fans hate Fatu, but because they love watching the war play out. This isn't storytelling anymore. It's spectacle. The bloodline used to make you feel. Now it makes you question. Not just who's in charge, but if anyone should be. Because when family turns into factions, when loyalty turns into leverage, what you're left with isn't just a fractured group. You're left with a legacy in ruins. We're not watching the bloodline evolve. We're watching it collapse in slow motion. And the scariest part? Roman's silence suggests he knew this would happen. Or worse, he planned for it. By the time Smackdown aired just days after Money in the Bank 2025, the WWE Universe was already buzzing with anticipation. Not curiosity, expectation. Everyone knew something big was coming. They just didn't know when, where, or how it would happen. WWE's promotional machine leaned into the chaos. The teaser trailers for that week's SmackDown didn't show new matches or tournament brackets. They showed two things: Jacob Fatu standing over Solo Sikoa with a chair, and Roman Reigns' name in the graphics, faint, like a ghost in the background. The message was clear: answers are coming. Or maybe more questions. Either way, you'd better watch. The moment the show opened, there was tension. Not the usual tension where fans wait for a title match or surprise debut. This was different. The kind of tension that builds when you know someone's about to pay for what they did. The arena was lit colder than usual. The commentary team barely tried to sell the first segment. The match card felt like background noise. Everything pointed to one story: the fallout from Fatu's betrayal, and the storm Solo Sikoa was surely bringing with him. But WWE didn't start with action. They started with absence. Jacob Fatu wasn't seen for the first hour. Solo Sikoa wasn't scheduled for anything. And Roman? Still silent. It was a masterclass in slow burn tension. The first shot of Solo came backstage. He was walking alone, hoodie up, no music, no Paul Heyman. A cameraman scrambled to follow him as he moved like a hunter through the arena. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch when approached. Security kept their distance. Referees whispered and backed out of his path. The message was clear: this wasn't business. This was personal. It's worth breaking down how WWE crafted this moment. Because in a show built on spectacle and noise, they used silence and subtlety to build dread. Solo's walk through the backstage area wasn't just filler. It was theater. Every few minutes, WWE cut back to him, closer, slower, more intense each time. In between, the matches continued, but they felt like interruptions. Everyone was waiting for the explosion. At the 50-minute mark, the cameras caught Jacob Fatu arriving in the parking lot. No music. Just the engine of the SUV cutting off as the door slammed. He stepped out, looking over his shoulder once. The crowd watching on the big screen roared. Not with cheers. With that guttural sound wrestling fans make when they know violence is coming. He wasn't dressed to wrestle. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He was walking into an ambush. WWE let that tension simmer for another 20 minutes. Solo disappeared from the screen. Fatu walked through the halls, arms swinging loose, casual, almost mocking. Fans online noted the contrast. Where Solo was all precision and pressure, Fatu looked like he couldn't care less. Like he didn't believe Solo would actually retaliate. And that made it even worse. Because in wrestling, false confidence is a death sentence. Then came the cut. The arena darkened slightly as the screen lit up. Jacob Fatu, backstage, talking to an interviewer, but never got a word out. Solo struck from the shadows. The camera didn't catch the first blow. It caught Fatu falling. A flash of movement. Then chaos. The next 45 seconds were destruction. This wasn't a match. This wasn't even a segment. It was a live-action punishment. Solo slammed Fatu into the wall. Into the floor. Over a crate. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just acted. Every blow had weight. Every slam echoed. And when Fatu tried to stand, half-limp, wild-eyed, Solo hit the Samoan spike with a violence fans hadn't seen since Umaga in his prime. Fatu dropped like a tower. Not flailing. Just, gone. It wasn't just a beatdown. It was a message. Solo stood over him. Breathing. Still silent. And then, the camera cut again. To Roman Reigns. Backstage. Sitting alone. Watching a monitor. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He didn't react. And WWE cut to black. The segment lasted 2 minutes. But the fallout lasted all week. That's how the Smackdown setup worked. It wasn't about shocking moments. It was about making fans feel cornered by inevitability. From the lighting cues to the camera movement to the way commentary hushed during the attack, WWE gave fans no room to breathe. They built the episode like a thriller. Solo Sikoa became the shark. Fatu became the blood in the water. And Roman? He was the deep silence beneath the surface, reminding everyone that even when he's not in the ring, the story still belongs to him. This is why that Smackdown mattered. Because it wasn't about answering questions. It was about turning them into pressure. Revenge in wrestling is usually loud. It comes with shouting promos, run-ins, weapons, and a crowd hungry for catharsis. But when Solo Sikoa decided to take his pound of flesh from Jacob Fatu on SmackDown, he flipped the script. He didn't talk. He didn't pose. He executed. And what unfolded wasn't a beatdown. It was a statement of hierarchy, a warning written in violence. This wasn't about getting even. This was about putting Jacob Fatu in the ground, metaphorically and almost literally. Let's break it down from the moment it started. The attack began where few truly memorable WWE moments do, backstage, raw, unfiltered, no pyro, no music, no lights. Just concrete floors, steel rails, and the sound of impact. Solo had been hunting all night. His first appearance walking through the backstage corridors was quiet but ominous. Every member of production moved out of his way. There were no jokes. No Sami Zayn meets Roman in the hallway energy. This was colder. More deliberate. That tone set the stage for what followed. Fatu, when we saw him, had that same cocky gait he'd always walked with since arriving in WWE. He moved like a predator. Loose shoulders, heavy breathing, and zero fear. That's why fans loved him. That Samoan wildness. That "no one's touching me" swagger. But this time, he was walking into a trap. When Solo struck, it was surgical. No warm-up. No words. Just sudden, raw force. The first punch didn't just knock Jacob Fatu back, it dropped him. Deadweight. It wasn't a warning shot. Solo wasn't trying to intimidate. He was trying to destroy. And he wasn't done. He dragged Fatu by the hair, something rare in men's wrestling, reserved only for personal moments. And rammed his head into the wall. Not once. 3 times. Slow. Precise. Letting Fatu drop to one knee before lifting him up again. It wasn't a backstage brawl. It was an execution ritual. Fans watching at home weren't cheering. They were holding their breath. Because the deeper the attack went, the clearer it became, Solo wasn't interested in retaliation. He was erasing Jacob Fatu. And WWE knew it. They didn't cut away. They didn't send refs to break it up, at least not immediately. The camera stayed close. No shaky cam. No fast cuts. Just long, suffocating shots of pain and punishment. Then came the turning point. After slamming Fatu into a stack of road cases, Solo grabbed a steel chair. This was personal now. This wasn't about proving dominance in a faction. This was Solo making sure Fatu didn't walk out under his own power. He jabbed the chair into Fatu's ribs, folded it, and brought it down across Fatu's back with a crack that echoed through the backstage tunnel. And then again. And again. By the 4th hit, Fatu wasn't fighting back. By the 5th, he wasn't even trying to move. This was systematic. Solo didn't just beat Fatu. He neutralized him. Security finally arrived, but not like they usually do. No dive tackles. No chaos. They came in slow, cautious, like they weren't sure if Solo would turn on them too. They shouted, tried to wedge themselves between him and the wreckage of Fatu's body, but Solo didn't acknowledge them. He stepped back. Just a few inches. Chair still in hand. The crowd inside the arena, watching this unfold on the Titantron, was stunned. You could hear them quiet. This wasn't the usual WWE Holy *T moment. This was real. It felt like we were watching someone cross a line. And then came the final shot. Solo waited until the refs helped Fatu to his knees. And then, boom, Samoan spike. One shot. Clean. Final. Fatu's body collapsed again, limp, eyes shut, mouth slightly open. And that's when the camera cut. Not to commercial, not to another match, but to Roman Reigns, backstage, alone, seated, watching. He didn't react. Not even a twitch. And that's where it ended. The fallout from that moment wasn't about surprise. It was about fear. For the first time since the Bloodline formed, the fear wasn't just about what Roman might do. It was about what Solo had already done, and what he was becoming. Because fans understood something instantly, this wasn't a guy following orders anymore. This was someone delivering justice on his own terms. Solo didn't shout, "I'm the new head of the table." He didn't cut a post-beatdown promo. He didn't raise his hand or point at the camera. He just stood there, over Jacob Fatu's broken body, breathing heavy. Still. Like a man who did what he came to do. No need to explain it. No interest in selling it. Just done. And that made it scarier. Because in wrestling, it's one thing to beat a man. It's another to break him. Solo Sikoa did the latter. Let's talk about why this mattered on a deeper level. For months, WWE had teased the idea that Solo Sikoa could be something more. Not just Roman Reigns' bodyguard. Not just the quiet one. Fans had started to wonder, what happens if Solo stops taking orders? Now they had their answer. He becomes the most dangerous man in WWE. Because unlike Roman, Solo doesn't need to speak. He doesn't use charisma to lead. He uses pain. And the WWE Universe is just now realizing how much damage he's willing to do when someone steps out of line. Jacob Fatu found that out the hard way. And what makes it worse? He's family. That's what hits different about this story. Solo didn't attack a rival. He punished blood. He didn't turn heel. He went tribal. In Samoan culture, and within the wrestling Anoa'i legacy, family is sacred. Betrayal isn't just personal. It's unforgivable. Solo's attack wasn't about matches or belts. It was about respect. It was about law. Bloodline law. And when Fatu broke it with that chair shot at MITB, Solo didn't demand an apology. He gave a sentence. Backstage sources reportedly said the segment was heavily protected. No leaks. No scripts floating online hours before. It was kept quiet intentionally. When talent saw the finished cut, many were stunned by how far it went. This wasn't a PG segment. It wasn't a mid-card feud. This was violence with legacy on the line. And it worked. Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, all lit up within minutes. Solo just made himself a main eventer. Roman's watching like a proud king. This is the most dangerous Bloodline has ever been. Fatu's done. Is Solo running the show now? The beauty of it all? WWE never answered those questions. And they didn't have to. Because sometimes, a Samoan spike speaks louder than any segment ever could. Wrestling is a language of excess. Pyro promos. Finishing moves yelled before they land. Emotion dialed to 11. But sometimes, it's what doesn't happen that sends the loudest message. That's what Roman Reigns delivered on Smackdown. In the final shot, after Solo Sikoa dismantled Jacob Fatu with the precision of a man performing sacred justice, WWE cut backstage. Roman Reigns. Alone. Watching. Sitting in a chair. Arms relaxed. Face unreadable. No expression of rage. No smile of satisfaction. No movement at all. And in that silence, an entire fanbase lost its collective mind. Because this wasn't a man being caught off guard. This wasn't a man shocked by betrayal or redemption. This was Roman Reigns being exactly who he's always been, calculated, unreadable, terrifyingly calm. The fans expected a reaction. They didn't get one. And that's the genius of it. Because by showing nothing, Roman let everyone project everything onto him. Was he proud of Solo? Disappointed? Was this revenge sanctioned by the tribal chief, or was Solo acting on his own? The internet split in half. Half of the audience believed Roman was the puppet master again, pulling strings from the shadows like he'd done a dozen times before. The other half believed he'd finally been outmaneuvered. That Solo had just gone rogue, and Roman didn't know how to respond. That single frame of Roman watching told both stories at once. And that's why it worked. Because WWE didn't clarify anything. They didn't show Roman later. They didn't cut to him giving an order earlier. There was no flashback. No commentary analysis. The camera simply faded to black. Letting the silence become the story. Let's go deeper. This wasn't the first time Roman sat in silence while chaos unfolded. In the early Bloodline era, Roman often avoided direct interference. He'd let the Usos fight wars while he stood tall with the title on his shoulder. He allowed destruction to happen around him because it reinforced the idea that power doesn't beg. It commands. That's what made this moment so chilling. Roman didn't need to stand over Jacob Fatu's broken body. He just needed to watch. That alone was enough to remind everyone, nothing happens in the bloodline without Roman seeing it. And that's why the fan theory started instantly. According to this theory, Solo didn't go rogue at all. This was a message planned between the cousins behind closed doors. Jacob Fatu's betrayal at Money in the Bank was too personal, too humiliating to go unpunished. Roman might not have been at ringside, but he didn't need to be. He sent his weapon. Solo Sikoa. Roman's silence in this view wasn't hesitation. It was contentment. A job well done. No words needed when vengeance is this clean. Some fans even noted a subtle shift in Roman's breathing when Solo hit the final Samoan spike. A slow exhale. A twitch of the eye. Micro-expressions, maybe, but enough to fuel the idea that this was exactly what he wanted. In this theory, the bloodline is still intact. Roman's still the king. And Solo? Still the hand of the king. This view is far more unsettling. According to this interpretation, Roman wasn't watching as a strategist. He was watching as a man losing control. The blank face? It wasn't calm. It was confusion. Maybe even fear. Because in this version, Solo Sikoa didn't act with Roman's blessing. He acted without it. And Roman didn't stop him. He couldn't. That would mean something far more dangerous is happening. The bloodline has outgrown its chief. The monster Roman created is now walking without a leash. If that's the case, then we didn't just watch a punishment on Smackdown. We watched a takeover. And Roman Reigns is realizing, maybe too late, that the empire he built no longer needs him to function. Or worse, it no longer wants him. This theory threads the needle between the two. Roman didn't directly order the attack, but he wanted to see what Solo would do when left alone. This was a test. A tribal rite of passage. A silent challenge. Jacob Fatu's betrayal wasn't just a violation. It was an opportunity. A chance to see if Solo could truly be the next alpha. Roman watched, not to give orders, but to measure the man. And what he saw? A successor. Not a follower. In this interpretation, Roman isn't angry. He's impressed. Maybe even worried. Because for the first time since he claimed the head of the table, Roman isn't sure he's still at it. No matter which theory you believe, one thing is true, Roman Reigns controlled the room without speaking. Again. That's the power he has. Not just as a character, but as a performer. He understands that in a world full of noise, stillness becomes currency. That single shot of Roman backstage did more storytelling than most matches do in 30 minutes. Let's analyze the shot itself. The lighting was dim. No spotlight. No shadows. Just a raw backstage light, cold and industrial. Roman sat in a steel chair, not a throne, not a cushioned sofa. His environment was bare. That choice was intentional. Roman wasn't in king mode. He wasn't draped in gold. He wasn't flanked by Heyman. He looked like a man watching something unravel. Or watching something rise. His body language was open. Legs spread slightly. Arms resting on the chair. No clenched fists. No tension in the shoulders. But his eyes never left the screen. He didn't blink much. And when Solo delivered the final blow? Still nothing. The camera didn't cut to commercial. It held on him. Let the moment hang in the air. Then cut to black. No words. No signature music. Just silence. That's where WWE excels. Because in most stories, a character like Roman Reigns would return with fanfare. With a monologue. With a declaration of war or peace. But WWE knows what they've built. Roman doesn't need to speak to remain dominant. He just needs to watch. And what we saw on Smackdown was that watchful presence reminding the audience, and the entire locker room, that even in silence, Roman Reigns is dangerous. Not because he attacks. Because he waits. He measures. He judges. And when the time is right, he acts. Or worse, he lets others act for him. And that's the most haunting possibility of all. Maybe Roman didn't plan any of this. Maybe he didn't tell Solo to attack Fatu. Maybe he's not in control anymore. But he's watching. And that means whoever rises next? Better be ready for what comes when the tribal chief stops being silent. In professional wrestling, revenge is a familiar drumbeat. A betrayal happens. A hero, or anti-hero, strikes back. Justice is served, and the audience gets closure. But what unfolded between Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu wasn't simple justice. It wasn't clean. It wasn't even satisfying in the traditional sense. It was raw. Personal. Heavy. And loaded with unspoken history. To understand why Solo's attack felt more like a tribal reckoning than a standard receipt, you have to look at the deeper motivations behind it, not just the surface emotions, but the internal wiring that made Solo do what he did, the way he did it. This wasn't a man trying to get even. This was a man enforcing a code. And Solo embraced that role fully. But what happens to a man who spends years being the weapon? Eventually, he starts to believe he's the hand that swings the sword, not just the blade. That shift in mentality is subtle. But it's everything. Solo wasn't acting on revenge for revenge's sake. He was defending structure. He was enforcing the same tribal hierarchy that once kept him in line, and now, ironically, placed him in command. When Jacob Fatu betrayed him, it wasn't just a fight for dominance. It was a direct attack on the rules that governed everything the Bloodline stands for: loyalty, obedience, and discipline. You don't disrespect your blood. Not in the ring. Not backstage. Not under the banner of Roman Reigns. So, Solo's retaliation had to be more than physical. It had to send a message, not just to Fatu, but to everyone watching. Cross the bloodline, and you won't get a storyline feud. You'll get erased. That's the psychology of tribal revenge in WWE's Bloodline narrative. It's not about anger, it's about restoration. Fatu broke the unwritten rule. Solo restored the balance. And the way he did it, slow, punishing, silent, wasn't accidental. It was symbolic. Now let's examine Jacob Fatu's side. On the surface, it looked like a classic betrayal. Big man turns on partner for glory or spotlight. But Fatu isn't that simple. He's not a spotlight chaser. He doesn't speak often. His whole character is built on unpredictability and violence. So, his betrayal at MITB wasn't driven by ego. It was driven by defiance. Fatu wasn't saying, "I want your spot." He was saying, "I don't need to follow your rules." That's what made it unforgivable. Because in the Bloodline, the moment you stop playing by the rules, you stop being family. You become prey. So, when Solo responded, it wasn't an emotional explosion. It was a cold correction. Fatu broke the chain. Solo snapped back to remind him who still forged it. There's a moment that proves how calculated this revenge was. When Solo struck Fatu backstage, there was no chaos in his body language. No signs of someone unhinged. He didn't rush. He didn't scream. He moved with intention. Every punch, every chair shot, every spike, it all looked rehearsed. Like he'd been waiting, watching, studying Fatu's weaknesses since MITB. That's not rage. That's strategy. Solo wasn't lashing out. He was closing a loop. And when you realize that, it reframes the entire segment. Because this wasn't a fight. It was a message to the rest of the locker room, and maybe to Roman himself. I don't need orders. I know what needs to be done. So now we ask, what does revenge really mean in this context? It's not just emotional payback. It's psychological re-establishment. Solo didn't need to win over Fatu. He needed to erase the very idea that Fatu could rebel without consequences. In the world of the Bloodline, there's no room for gray area. You're either in or out. You're either obeyed or destroyed. That binary code is what Roman used to build his empire. And now, Solo is using the same code, but possibly without Roman's oversight. And that brings up a dangerous idea: what happens when the enforcer believes he's the law? Let's not forget, Solo grew up watching Roman, the Usos, and countless members of the Anoa'i family dominate WWE with a shared purpose. He was the youngest in the room for a long time. Now? He's the last man standing. The revenge wasn't just for what happened at MITB. It was for everything. For being seen as the background piece. For being talked over in Bloodline meetings. For being left behind in title pictures. And maybe, deep down, for being the one who stayed loyal the longest, and was still disrespected first. So when Solo finally struck, he wasn't just punishing Fatu. He was releasing years of restraint. And that's the scariest version of revenge. The kind that's been waiting in silence. Jacob Fatu came into WWE like a storm that had already been brewing for years. By the time he finally debuted, fans were ready. Not just intrigued, hungry. They'd seen his dominance on the independent scene. They'd watched clips of his brutality, his agility, his wildness. He wasn't just another member of the Anoa'i dynasty. He was supposed to be the next evolution of it. And at first, it looked like he was. The moment Jacob stepped into a WWE ring, the aura was real. No overproduced entrance, no cheap pops. Just raw energy. Power. Intensity. You could feel the crowd pulse differently when he showed up. He didn't even need to speak. He moved like someone who knew exactly what he was. A weapon. When WWE slotted him into the Bloodline orbit, it felt like destiny. If Solo Sikoa was the blade, Jacob Fatu was the cannonball. A one-man wrecking crew, built like a tank but moving like a cruiserweight. The idea of these two as the future of the Bloodline? It wasn't just believable, it was terrifying. And for a few short weeks, it worked. Fatu didn't just add muscle to the Bloodline name, he added chaos. His presence brought back echoes of Umaga, of the Wild Samoans, of a time when fear didn't need promos to sell it. His matches were blunt force trauma wrapped in charisma. The fans loved it. But that love came with a catch. Fatu was never going to follow. That's the core of his downfall. Jacob Fatu might have shared blood with the Bloodline, but his spirit was something else entirely. Wild. Independent. Defiant. He wasn't designed to fall in line under Roman Reigns. He wasn't going to let Solo Sikoa call the shots. The whole idea of hierarchy didn't fit with how Fatu moved, how he wrestled, how he looked at the ring. So, the betrayal at Money in the Bank wasn't just shocking, it was inevitable. Jacob Fatu wasn't built to serve. He was built to take. And the second he saw the structure around him trying to box him in, he shattered it. But here's where things broke down. WWE thrives on discipline. Even in storylines, even in kayfabe, order matters. Characters can be wild, but the system has to make sense. Roman Reigns understood that. He didn't just dominate through strength, he built a system of control. Loyalty mattered. Betrayal had rules. Jacob Fatu ignored all of that. When he attacked Solo from behind, he wasn't making a power play. He was spitting in the face of structure. He didn't replace Solo. He didn't challenge for leadership. He just rejected the idea of needing one. And WWE punished him for it. Not directly. Not in the usual losing streak after a turn way. They let Solo handle it. And that's what led to the downfall. Let's look at the timeline. Fatu turns at MITB. The crowd is shocked, confused, but excited. By the time Smackdown rolls around, WWE is playing it close to the chest. Fatu doesn't cut a promo. He doesn't explain his actions. That's not an accident. They knew where the story was headed. When Solo attacked, it wasn't just a plot twist, it was a finale. From a character perspective, Fatu was dealt with. Not just beaten, but removed. There was no medical update segment. No "will he return" angle. He was taken off the map with finality. And that, more than anything, marked the end of his momentum. Fatu went from next big thing to ghost story. Not because he lacked skill. Not because fans turned on him. But because in a universe governed by Roman's shadow, you don't break the code and walk away untouched. This is the quiet rule of WWE storytelling at its highest level: actions come with consequences. Big moves, especially emotional, shocking betrayals, are only meaningful when the fallout is felt. Jacob Fatu's downfall isn't a burial. It's a lesson. He refused to play the game. And the game devoured him. There's still a future for Fatu, of course. He's too talented, too compelling, too unique to be wasted long term. But for now, he exists in the shadow of his own decision. He could have been the hammer of the new Bloodline. Instead, he became its first casualty. That's the cost of rejecting legacy in a world where legacy is the story. Jacob Fatu didn't lose a match. He lost his place. And in the Bloodline, that's a far more dangerous defeat.